So welcome back to Rev Up. We are doing model 6 today, although I don't think we're on like day 6. I don't even know what day, but we're doing working with buyers and getting your offer accepted. So we're going to talk about the buyer process from point of lead gen. I've selected a buyer to the close of escrow. So again, it's a lot of information to cover today, but we're going to work really hard and get through that. I'm hoping also to have some time to briefly go over the buyer broker agreement, which now has a new name, but we'll cover that as well. Abby shared in the chat box the link to the folder that has a whole bunch of goodies in it to go along with this lesson. I'll cover those at the end too. That comes with setting realistic expectations, Antoinette. Realistic expectations. And sometimes there's nothing you can do to get a buyer to not cancel. So there's a link in the chat box for that Google Drive. She'll also post it like in the description when we post the video onto the YouTube channel, and I'm sure it'll get shared as well on the spreadsheet that has links to all the classes. So a couple different ways that you can find information there. So working with buyers, getting your offer accepted. Let me get on the right page so I can change the slides. Fabulous. So we're going to cover the steps in the buyer process, buyer qualification and consultation, the art of showing homes, purchase agreement concepts. We're going to go over the full purchase agreement next week. Buyer's market versus seller's market and getting your offer accepted. So just so you know, that's kind of what our plan is today. Now, as always, we've talked about lead gen often, and I will continue to like beat it in there because without lead generation, you have no business. So just a reminder, 5 types of lead gen should be part of your business. One being your sphere of influence or your existing database. One should be leads from listings that you get. We should be generating leads from those. And the additional items are going to be, you're going to choose 3 additional legs of lead gen to focus in on. That could be things like circle prospecting, referrals, open houses, internet, your farm, circle of influence, which we already talked about, mailers, social media, networking, door knocking. So there's lots of ways to generate specifically for buyers. I highly recommend that you lead generate specifically for sellers and then pick up buyers along the way, only because leads from our listing leads are gold because they lead to listings, which lead to more leads because we're going to get leads from our listings. I'm not going to continue to belabor that point, but just a heads up, there's lots of different ways to lead generate for buyers. The buyer process, it's like a curvy little S map, as you can see. You start with the buyer qualification, right? So we're going to talk about that buyer qualification process and homework that we're going to give our potential buyers, the initial meeting with the lender. We're going to have our buyer consultation where we go over the home selling process and clarify what it is that they're looking for in a home. And we're going to set those expectations for the buying process up front. We're going to make sure to get our representation agreement signed. This is not common practice in the state of California, and it should be because it protects you to make sure you get paid for the work that you do for your buyer. You're going to set showing appointments. We're going to arrange those showings, and we're going to consider or eliminate each property as we see it. Properties selected, and we're going to review those properties with their criteria. We'll talk about that. Once they select a property, we're going to make an offer and negotiate that offer. Then we're going to open escrow. We're going to go through the pending path, which is step number 10 up there, which has its own little breakout of like 14 steps. Then we're going to move towards closing by signing loan and escrow documents at the title company. Then we're going to fund and record if it's a finance deal, and then buyer takes possession. So that's kind of the buyer process in a nutshell. As part of the documents in that folder that we're sharing with you, there is a transaction list that kind of walks you through all the little teeny tiny steps in the process, as close as we could identify. So as always, as I go through this, if anybody has questions, unmute yourself, raise your hand, throw something in the comments box. Gloria, we will repost the link to the Google Drive at the end, because I think what happens is if we post something in the chat, before you arrive to the meeting, you can't see it. It has to be posted after you arrive, maybe. So we'll repost it at the end with the list to log your attendance. And then we'll also share it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I am trying to watch the chat box, just so you know. So if you pop something in there, I do try to catch it. It just may take me a minute, but feel free to just interrupt me and say, hey, I've got a question. All right. So your first step with your buyer is you want to pre-qualify your buyers. You've got somebody that raises their hand and says, hey, I was thinking about buying a house, right? Or I've always wanted to buy a house, or whatever it might be. We want to make sure we pre-qualify them to make sure they are ready, willing, and able. Okay, ready, willing, and able. Can they make a move now, right? Do they have a house to sell? Are they in a lease that doesn't expire for 9 months that they can't get out of? Do they have their financing in order? Do they have funds available for down payment and closing costs and inspections and reports? Are they willing? Are they strongly motivated? Are they ready to move forward and make the purchase? And are they able? It's very similar to ready, but are there credit issues to resolve? Have they been on their job long enough? Do they make enough money? And are there any legal issues going on, right? Divorces, name changes. Are they getting married soon, right? Whatever those things might be, we want to make sure that we address those to make sure they're actually able to purchase right now. Just so you know too, if somebody's in the middle of a divorce or they're separated from a spouse and they're trying to, this happens a lot, right? We get separated from spouses and then we want to go purchase our own home. If they purchase that home before the divorce is finalized, their other partner will have to sign off on the purchase of that home, stating that they understand they are purchasing a home that they are not on the title of. So just a little heads up on that. It does happen. Sometimes that does cause the process to come to a screeching halt. And other times people are like, that's not a problem. They're more than happy to sign off, and I don't mind having them sign off on it. So just something to consider when you've got a divorce situation or a separation situation going on. We want to make sure to ask a lot of questions to find out if people are ready, willing, and able. Those people that are ready, willing, and able, that they're thinking about making a purchase in the next 30 days, those are going to be our A buyers. So if you're tagging them in your database, if you're labeling them, whatever that is, those are our A buyers, ready, willing, and able. In the next 30 days, they're ready to start the home buying process. If we're talking 30 days to 6 months, right? 2 to 6 months, then they're a B buyer. Okay, not any less important. They're just padding our pipeline for later on this year. And then our C buyers would be those that are going to be ready, willing, and able 6 months or more. Okay, again, there's nothing wrong with those people. We're still going to nurture them and stay in contact with them and bring them into that buyer position, whether it's 7 months from now or whether they speed the process up to 3 months. It happens. So just some questions that you can ask people to find out if they're ready, willing, and able, right? Ready, do you have a current home to sell? Or do you own your current home, right? If they own it, are they going to sell it? If they're going to sell it, is it local? Do they need you to list it? Is it someplace else? Do they need a referral to a listing agent? Is it already on the market, right? We want to fish around and figure out where that property is in process. Depending on the market, depends on when we would start looking for a home. If they do have a home to sell, right? When the market's hot and everybody's getting 28 offers on a property, having a home to sell that's not on the market or not in contract, it's going to be hard to get your offer accepted. In a little bit of a slower market, it's not going to be as hard to get that accepted, but we still want to make sure that house is moving towards being on the market and being sold. I prefer not to start showing properties until their other home is on the market. That's just me, but it also depends on the situation. If they don't own their current home, they lease their current home. When does their lease expire? Can they break their lease, right? We want to ask questions about the leased property to make sure that they're going to be ready, willing, and able to move forward with breaking that lease, or that they're on a month-to-month type situation. Okay. Will you be paying all cash, or will you be financing the purchase, right? If they're paying all cash, are the funds readily accessible, or do you need time to secure them? It's not uncommon for somebody that's doing a cash purchase that they've got the funds aren't quite liquid. They're tied up in investments and different things. And so they need to make them liquid. So we need to know what that time frame looks like. If financing will be used, right? How much do you plan to use for a down payment? Do you have a mortgage lender, right? If they have somebody, have they been in touch with them recently for a pre-approval? Was it a full approval or a preliminary approval? And may I get the contact information for the loan officer so that I can make sure I understand the program that they've qualified you for, right? If they don't have a mortgage lender, do you have someone at your bank or credit union that you will use, or do you need me to refer you to somebody? Even if they have their own, it may be a good idea to ask to refer them to somebody that you know, love, and trust, so that you make sure that your team on this transaction, because everybody that becomes a part of this transaction is part of your team, that you know you can trust them. Okay. Is somebody willing? Ideally, when would you like to be in your new home, right? What kind of time frame do they have? Have you already been looking for homes? Is there anything that might hold you back from moving forward with a home purchase? Do you have any children? How do they feel about your possible move? Are you the only decision maker, right? If you're meeting with somebody, you know they're married, are you the only decision maker? Like, how does this work? Are there any friends, coworkers, family members who will be helping you with this purchase? If so, who? It's not uncommon to have parents help with a purchase. You meet with, the nice newly married couple. You talk about everything they want and desire, what their budget is. And then you go to show properties, and all of a sudden there's like a whole trail of people following behind them. And you realize that their down payment's actually coming from the in-laws or somebody like that. So we want to make sure everybody's on the same page, because oftentimes family members have a whole different idea about what the house is they should be buying. And able, we just want to make sure we're listening carefully for anything that they say in the additional statements, answering questions that might trigger us to think that they're not quite in a position to be able to buy. Okay, something like I already mentioned, like a recent divorce, credit issues, job losses or changes, recent long distance moves. Lots of things could prohibit them from being able to buy. Okay. Their homework assignment. So once you've determined they're ready, willing, and able, they may not have met with their lender yet, whatever it might be, then we're going to give them a homework assignment. Okay. Our homework assignment is we want them to make 3 lists, right? So we're going to schedule a buyer consultation. You can determine for your business what you find more successful, whether you want to have that buyer consultation, even if they haven't yet met with a lender, or only once they've met with a lender. I kind of have 2 different approaches for that. If somebody's met with the lender, they're ready, willing, and able. They're ready to kind of move forward. So we're really just going to sit down and nail out the specifics of their home search and make sure they understand the home buying process. If I've met with somebody maybe at an open house and they haven't gotten pre-qualified yet, but they're interested in moving forward with the home purchase, often them not understanding fully what that home purchase process looks like will hold them back from contacting a lender. So oftentimes, if you've got those people that have been dragging around and you're waiting for them to contact a lender, it's because they've got some fear surrounding the process and they're just not confident they're ready. So what I would do with those people is I would sit down with them and just go through the home buying process and make sure they understand how it works, answer any questions, address any concerns, and then send them to the lender. I don't feel like my time is lost. We're not going to go in depth with those people into what the home is that they're looking for, what their must-haves are, their price range, all of that, because they're not ready, willing, and able yet. They haven't met with the lender. We haven't confirmed that they're going to be ready, willing, and able. Okay. Yes, I would give them a buyer's packet so that they could see what that process looks like. Antoinette, absolutely. It's just not going to go in as far into the actual homes or the what their must-haves are, and setting them up on a property search.
Do you have a sample buyer's packet and this buyer's questionnaire in the documents that Abby's going to put on?
There is.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If somebody's already met with a lender, now we're going to nail down, make sure that they understand that process. If we've already visited with them before they met with the lender and gone over the process, then I would just ask, do you understand anything? Do you have any questions regarding the home buying process? And then we're really going to dive into the must-haves for their home, which is where the homework assignment comes into play. So if they've met with their lender, then we want to sit down with them before we go look at properties and make sure that they complete their homework assignment and go over that with them. Their homework assignment, there's a script for this. So here's how this script kind of rolls, right? The next step in the process is to meet and determine exactly what it is that you're looking for. Plus, it will allow me the opportunity to get acquainted with my team and system for finding the right property for you. Does that sound good? When is a good time to meet in my office? I wouldn't say when is a good time to meet in my office. I would say, would you rather meet in the morning or afternoon? And does Tuesday at 9 o'clock work, or, Friday at 5 o'clock, depending on what they say to that, right? I'm not going to just open my schedule up to them. Even if I have nothing on my schedule, I'm going to use those pre-planned appointments that I already put on my calendar, and I'm going to book them into one of those time slots. Makes you seem a little bit more in demand if we just give them appointment slots offered instead of the entire calendar. Once you set that date and time, great. I'm really looking forward to meeting with you or seeing you again. I know you'll be very impressed with the systems we have for finding just the right property for each of our buyers. In order to make our meeting extremely productive, I'm going to give you a little homework assignment. Okay. And then the buyer usually goes, okay, and what's that, right? Something like that. You're going to say, grab a piece of paper and something to write with. Do you have that? You're going to say, okay, here we go. I want you to make 3 lists. The first list is our must-have list. When you're thinking about your ideal home and property, any feature that you absolutely must have will go on that list. Does that make sense? So these are only the non-negotiables. Okay, we are going to go on that list. Does that make sense? The buyer's going to be like, yeah, sure, I can do that. You're going to go, terrific. Now, the second list is the bonus list. These are the features that you would love in a home, for a home or property to have, but you could live without them or add them later. Does that make sense? Yes, it does, right? So bonus list, those are going to be things like, well, we would like a pool, but we could always put one in later, or an updated kitchen would be nice, but maybe doing the updates ourselves wouldn't be so bad, right? So that might be on their bonus list. You're going to say, good. The third and last list will be your knockout list. Sometimes I call this the no-no list. This will be the list of features that you find absolutely unacceptable. Do you got it? You bet. Got it, right? So we're going to have our must-have list, our bonus list, and our knockout or our no-no list that the buyers are going to come to the appointment with after they've met with the lender and they've gotten pre-approved. So we might meet with them before the lender. They'll meet, get pre-approved, and then we're going to sit down with them after the lender appointment, and they're going to bring this list. And then you can end the call. Like I said, I know you'll be very impressed with my buyer system. This will be great fun working together. I will see you on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Be sure to bring your lists. And they're going to say, perfect, see you then. Okay, any questions about those lists?
Now I see too why I'm like kind of all over the place. I didn't have this system in place. I was just like, oh, you want to look at homes? Fine. What home? And then they like shoot me to the homes and then we go look. Never had that sit down. I shoot them the presentation, but not this details.
Yeah, by making sure you get this list from them, it allows you, if they send you a property and there's something on their no-no list at that property, it allows you to say, hey, I see that you wanted to, go look at this property, but it has, a separate living room and family room, and you said that was on your no-no list. Are you sure you want to see this property? Or because it's situated like that with that floor plan, do we just want to eliminate it and not go look at it, right? So we're helping to save us time and energy in showing properties that aren't going to match their qualifications. All right. So they're going to meet with their lender. You're going to make sure, you want to make sure that you connect with that lender as well, that you have their contact information, that the lender has actually reviewed their income and asset documentation and their credit report, right? We want to make sure they're fully qualified to purchase a home and not just, oh, I took what the buyer said and issued a pre-approval letter, right? So that would be technically like a pre-qualification letter, not a pre-approval letter, right? So we want to make sure the lenders reviewed everything, what the loan program is that they've placed them into, right? Because there's lots of different programs, lots of different things out there. So we want to make sure we understand it. We want to make sure we know what the top end of their price range is and what the buyer is comfortable with. So oftentimes their price range may be 650,000, but the payment they're comfortable with is closer to 550,000. So we just want to make sure that we have those questions answered and that the lender has gone over the payment with an estimate of taxes and insurance included in that payment with the buyer, and that is the price range they are comfortable with. And we want to make sure there's not anything with the lender that would prevent us from moving forward. Okay, so we want to make sure we have a conversation with that lender. Then we're actually going to sit down. We've had the conversation with the lender. The buyer's doing their homework. We've scheduled the appointment. Now we're going to sit down with them. I highly recommend you sit down with all of your buyers in the office before you go look at properties. Number one, as Antoinette said, this system and this process is important in flushing out what the buyers actually want to buy, what their time frame looks like, and what their must-haves and their no-nos are. And it also sets just a level of professionalism and keeps you in control with setting expectations and going over the ground rules. When you meet with people on the fly and you show up, you just go show properties, you rarely ever go back and go through what their must-haves and their have-nots are. And it becomes a mess.
So in regards to the Zillow Flex people, the ones that
Yes.
want to see the property right now, do we just show them that property and then say, okay, I would really like to sit down with you to find out what your preferences are, what your must-haves, what your wants, and what your no-nos are?
Yeah. So online leads are kind of a different beast. And in the case of Zillow leads, keep in mind, number one, that it's a security risk to meet somebody for the first time at a property. So I would recommend that if you decide to meet with those online leads or anybody at the property, that's the first time you're meeting them, to show them a house, that you have somebody with you for your own safety and security so that you're not there alone. And I do understand that sometimes with those online leads, getting them to that first house so you can start building that relationship is what you have to do in order to build that rapport to get them to the office to sit down. So yes, absolutely. Sometimes I think it's necessary to meet them, show them the house. If they're not going to write an offer on that house, then I would say the next step is let's schedule a time to meet at the office and go through exactly what it is that you're looking for and make sure that all of your questions and concerns with the home buying process have been addressed and that we set up expectations for what this process will look like. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. During the buyer consultation, right, we're going to verify the loan qualification. So we're going to go over what the lender talked with us about, if there was any red flags or hurdles that we have to overcome. We're going to talk to them about the fact that the lender said that your max purchase price was, $650,000, and double check with them. Have you gotten a breakdown of what that payment looks like at that purchase price? I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that. And then also, are you on the same page with the down payment? The lender said you're going to put 20% down and that the closing cost should be about 2.5% of the purchase price or whatever the lender said. And just verify that they're comfortable with all those numbers. Okay. Sometimes they get overwhelmed in that pre-qualification process. So we want to make sure they're comfortable, because there's nothing worse than writing an offer on a property. The lender sends out their initial disclosures and the buyer calls us and says, I didn't realize that was going to be my payment. I don't want to move forward anymore. I want to cancel, right? That's like worst case scenario. So we want to go over that during the buyer consultation after they've met with the lender. Okay. We are going to review their home search criteria, right? So we're going to look at those lists that they brought with them and go over each of those items and talk with them. Why is that important to you? Right? What about that's a no-no or a knockout item, right? We want to understand where they're coming from and why they put those things on the list so that we can better understand and better define the house that they want to move into. Okay, so one of those key questions is, why is that important to you? We want to learn as much as we can about our buyers, their background, culture, family, lifestyle, who makes the buying decisions, right? We want to know them. We want to build relationship with them. Think forward, right? Family, occupation, recreation, dreams. We want to introduce the buyer to your team. So if you have other people working with you, this would be a good time to introduce, like if you have a transaction coordinator that's going to be in contact with them after they enter into contract. If you use showing assistants to help show properties, you know, any of those people who might come into play during that transaction, it's a good time to introduce them either in person or just at least introduce them by name and kind of what their role in the transaction will be. You're going to educate the buyer about the process from showing to closed. Okay. You're going to go through that buyer presentation with them. If you already kind of went through that process before you sat down with them, because you met with them before they sat down with the lender, then we're just going to briefly go over it again and ask if they have any questions or concerns, or if there's anything they didn't understand with regards to the process. Okay. We are going to secure the buyer loyalty agreement, right? The buyer broker agreement. We are going to go over that with them and get a signature on that, which is going to entail us discussing, you know, agency and how compensation is paid out and all of those things there. I also recommend that when you sit down with your buyers before they get ready to purchase a home, when we're kind of, they're pre-approved, they're ready to go look at homes, that we give them a copy of the purchase agreement, maybe the statewide buyer and seller agreement, right? The RPA, the SBSA, the market conditions advisory, the MCA, right? All good things to include at this with a blank copy of those. So if they have time, if they're like one of those personality types that really wants to look at each detail and read everything thoroughly and in depth, this gives them the opportunity to do that before it's time to write an offer. Okay, send that home with them. And then we are going to schedule, we're going to find out what their schedule looks like, if they're ready to go see properties, what that next appointment's going to look like. And then you can let them know that, hey, I'm going to set you up on a search. I'm going to send you over some properties that match the criteria that we discussed with. And maybe you're sitting down with them on Monday and maybe you're like, you know, would you like to go look at properties on Wednesday at whatever time they're available, right? If we kind of know what their schedule looks like, then we can pre-plan that first showing appointment. Okay, any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
All right.
No, that's what I wish I had this in place before instead of going crazy with these buyers we got.
It's never too late. It's never too late. All right. The pending path, right? So I told you there were some steps on that pending path. What happens from pending to when we're ready to sign documents and close. So this is kind of what that pending path looks like. We're going to enter into contract on the property, which involves writing the offer, negotiating the offer. Then you've got the good faith deposit that's due. You've got what the title company has taken care of on their side and reviewing and making sure that the title is going to be free and clear from the date they take possession of it. Their lender is going to be going on the back end, issuing those initial disclosures that they're going to have to sign off on and then submit their file to underwriting. We're going to be conducting on our end inspections and investigation on the property, reviewing seller disclosures, taking care of all of those things. This is also where you would negotiate repairs. And just so you know, as part of my buyer consultation, I like to set the expectation ahead of time for seller repairs. So we talk about what that buying process looks like and how we're going to have inspections done on the property and how all the inspections are optional, but we recommend inspections, and based on the house, we'll make recommendations at the time they enter into contract, but at the very least, like a full home inspection. And then we can let them know that if anything comes up on these inspections or reports or further investigation with the property, that would be a deal breaker that would cause you to not want to move forward with the purchase of the home. Those are the things we would ask the seller to repair prior to the close of escrow. We're not looking for the little things like there's a missing outlet cover or the doorknob gets stuck. Those things are just kind of maintenance items, but we're looking for those big items that would cause you to want to cancel the contract. Okay, right? So I set that expectation at the buyer consultation. So when we go look at properties, that's how they're looking at the properties. And when we go into the inspections and the repair request, that's what the expectation is that we're looking for in order to ask for repairs. Now, you better believe it that when we get into the middle of this contract and we're talking about repairs and there's something that comes up, I'm going to throw some other stuff onto that repair request for that buyer. And I never tell a buyer we can't write a repair request. but I always add more than what we actually want if we're asking for repairs, so that I have room to negotiate things off that repair request. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yep, that sounds good.
Um,
More is better.
more is better. Sometimes they just approve it, right? Sometimes they're like, sure, let's just do it so we can get it done. And then we come out ahead. But it gives me that ability to be like, you know what, if we could just get the seller, when I'm talking with the other agent, if we could just get the seller to take care of this, then I think we can save this deal. And they're like, oh, okay, right? So then we negotiate those items. I usually let them know also during the buyer consultation that the lender's going to ask for documents and updated documents. And sometimes it might feel a little overwhelming and a little like minor items, and that's completely normal. So they're going to run your file through underwriting. The underwriter is going to kick it back and ask for updated or supporting documents, things like they're going to ask you to list out all the deposits in your account and where those deposits came from, or they may ask you for a letter of explanation to something that's on your credit report. They just need those for the file. And so that's completely normal. If there's ever anything that they ask you for that you feel like is out of line, feel free to run it by me and we can have a conversation about it, right? So I always let them set them up for that expectation ahead of time. Because again, there's nothing worse than getting in the middle of a transaction. Your lender sends them over their list of conditions and they go, oh my gosh, there's no way we could do this. They're asking for too much. Why would the lender even care and ask these things? So I just give them a heads up ahead of time. So they're kind of expecting and anticipating that. Title issues, right? Anything that comes up on the title issues. We recently had a transaction in our office. We've got an agent representing the buyer, and it has a solar lien on our solar lease on the house that the buyer was supposed to be assuming. And the company that handles that lease, well, the company that installed the solar has now gone out of business, and the company that handles the lease only deals with the commercial side of things. They don't handle the transferring of the lease. And so the deal's kind of dead in the water until they figure out a plan. So things like that might come up on title, right? Or maybe there's only 2 people on the listing agreement and there's a third person that shows up on title. This is one of the reasons as a listing agent, you always want to pre-open title and escrow so you can review the title before you run into these problems. So you just want to check with title and make sure there's no issues on there. We always review the preliminary title report that Pamela and Malika went over last week to make sure we don't see any red flags. Then we're going to prepare to close the transaction. Okay. Your buyer consultation, that's a really good time to let your buyers know that during this purchase process, they should not change anything with their financial status or life status. We should not be getting married. We should not be buying cars. We should not be opening lines of credits or loans. This is not the time to do that, and to wait until they have keys and it's officially recorded. Okay. It will kill your deal. Okay. You can let them know that during this process, right, this is a good place to introduce your transaction coordinator, that they're going to be in contact with you, coordinating all the inspections or sending you things that maybe need to be signed. Please make sure to review all documents fully before signing them, and let me know if you have any questions, right? As part of the buyer consultation, you want to make sure you're sprinkling lots of comments all through your presentation about what you're going to do for your buyers, right? Like, I'm going to help you negotiate the best possible price and terms. I will act as your advocate. My job is to help you get through the process and the paperwork quickly and successfully, right? All things that we want to reiterate our value to the buyer. Getting the representation agreement signed. This, a lot of people get really nervous when we start talking about buyer rep agreements. It's okay. The goal of the buyer rep agreement is it outlines my duties to the buyer and the buyer's duties to me, right? It holds us accountable to what we're committing to in our agency relationship. So it's not super scary. I will go over that. I'm hoping to have time today. So I'm hoping to go over that with you all today and just kind of give you the brief overview of that agreement and how to explain it to a buyer. as far as we're concerned, we want to make sure that we get paid for all of our efforts and that the buyer doesn't, we go show them 20 properties and then they turn around and write an offer with another agent. We don't want that happening. We want to make sure that we get compensated.
So what if you
Yes.
have one that signed a buyer's representation agreement and now they're ghosting you? And then later on, you find out they purchased a home within the time frame listed on the buyer's agreement. What would you do in
Then-
that scenario?
Absolutely. Then I would take it to the broker of the office, and it's going to be a phone call to the brokerage of the broker of the other office.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
If you want to hold them to that. It's always
Okay.
your choice, right?
Oh, yeah.
Represent, and I don't have just so everybody knows, I don't have a problem if a buyer decides that they no longer want to work with me of releasing them from that agreement. There is no way I want to hold somebody to have to work with me that doesn't want to work with me. That being said, I want to make sure they understand that, hey, if you decide to turn around and make an offer on any of these properties that we've identified and seen, that I will represent you in that purchase. But moving forward, any additional properties, you're welcome to use somebody else. I'm happy to do that. But they need to communicate with me. So that's right. Part of the representation agreement is setting that expectation. This is a good way to move forward, a good transition. Let's move to the paperwork that allows me to represent you. I will give you an overview of each section. It's actually pretty straightforward. And if you have any questions, please let me know, right? Good transition statement as you're going through your buyer consultation. After the buyer signs that representation agreement, then remember, before we close out our buyer consultation appointment, that's usually kind of the last thing that we do at the buyer consultation appointment. Then you're going to set the appointment or set the expectation before they leave for the office for the next time you'll be in contact. Okay, every time we talk with our clients, we want to set the expectation or set the time that we will be checking back in with them. So that they know what to expect and we can follow through. It just leaves them that level of confidence and assurance that we're handling it. Okay, if we close out the buyer appointment and there's no next appointment of how we're going to go show homes or when we're going to show homes, then they leave the office wondering, well, what's the next step? How do we proceed, right? Or if we show homes and they aren't going to write any offers on that one and we don't set the expectation of when we're going to see properties again or when we're going to talk again, then they leave that with a little bit of uncertainty. So we want to remove that uncertainty by always having the next conversation or the next appointment scheduled. Okay. So after they sign the agreement, you're going to set your first appointment to show a few homes and set those expectations before you leave the office. I highly recommend that you don't go show 20 homes at a time. It's overwhelming. It's exhausting. You'll never make it through all 20. I have shown like way more than we should have. Probably like 15 or 16 at one time. It makes for a whole day and it's exhausting. Bring snacks, bring treats, bring waters to share with your clients. So I don't recommend that. I recommend that you keep it somewhere in that like 4 to 6 range max. Okay. And you can even like outline that to them, like, hey, out of all the available homes, we're going to pick our top 6 homes, right? That have all of your must-haves, maybe some of those bonuses, and we're going to make sure they don't have any of those knockout items. Does that sound reasonable? And they're going to be like, yeah, that sounds good. I don't want to see more than 6 homes, right? After each house that you show, and before you move to the next one, ask them to evaluate the house that they saw. And sometimes I find it easier. Like we show the house, I generally don't put them in my car. They usually drive their own car. So they drive to the next house. Before we go into the next house, I ask them what their thoughts were on the previous house. And the reason I give them that time in between houses is oftentimes like spouses or buying partners or whoever like to have a conversation. And one of them may have loved it. The other one may have hated it. And this gives them time to bring their thoughts into alignment with each other so that we kind of know where that one stood. While we're in the property, I'm going to ask them questions, right? Oh, on your must-have list, you had an updated kitchen. Is this what you had in mind? Right? you wanted 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Are these bedrooms the right size, right? We're trying to get an idea of things that might be hiccups in the plan and asking them what they like, what they don't like about the house, why they're there. And then you're going to ask them to kind of rate that home against the other properties before you move on to the next one. Okay. You can always ask them, like, is this a home that you would write an offer on? And you can usually see it in their body language and their expression of whether they love the home or they didn't like it. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, be able to pay attention to your buyers. Let's see here. If they find a property that they want to write an offer on, talk with them about how you will prepare the offer, right? So if you usually prepare an electronic offer, ask if they would like to sit down to go over the offer before they sign it, or ask if they'd like you to send it to them via email, and then they can call you with any questions. Some people like to sit down and other people like to call with questions. When it's the first offer I'm writing with somebody, I always want to make sure they have that ability to sit down with me and go over it to make sure they fully understand what they're submitting as an offer on a property. Usually after that first offer, it gets a lot easier. Okay. Ask what the best way to communicate with them during your time is. Do they prefer text messages? Do they prefer phone calls? Do they like emails, right? What do they pay attention to and what do they like? Make sure that they had a copy of that buyer before they leave your first appointment, your buyer consultation. Make sure they have a copy of that buyer packet. And again, I would include the purchase agreement, the market conditions advisory, and the statewide buyer and seller advisory. And then make sure they also have a link, send them over a link, share your home search app with them, right? So they can search straight from the app, the Realty One Group app, the OneSuite app. And then that way they can, if they see something they like, they can send you a message directly. Okay.
Can you do a class on that one too?
Yes.
You're the best.
I just have to update something so that I can share my phone on Zoom. But yes, I can. So once they leave, now we're going to get them set up on a home search with their must-haves, their list, right? We went over that yesterday. It was recorded. So if you want to know how to navigate Barry's with all the fields and the additional fields and how to set up those searches, you can go back and watch that training. But we're going to set that up so it's an automatic search. We've also talked about Real Scout and OneSuite that you can set up searches in both of those programs as well. So just choose which one you want. There's no wrong or right answer. They all work. They're all sufficient. So just pick which one you want your buyers in, and then I would be consistent in that process moving forward. We want them getting properties. If you've got a ready, willing, and able buyer, we want them getting potential listings as soon as they're coming on the market. Okay. No more than 6 homes per appointment. We already talked about that. So they start to mix them up, and I would ask them to eliminate properties as they move forward. As we talked about, like before we go into the next house, what did you think of the last one? Once you've seen 2 or 3, you can go, well, which one's your favorite, right? Why is it your favorite? What did you like most about that? Well, what did you like about that one that you didn't like in that one, right? So we can ask those questions to really narrow down and zero in on what they are looking for. You can contact your database with your buyer's criteria. Maybe once a week, we send out an email to our database, or once a month or once every couple of weeks that says, hey, I've got buyers looking for the following properties. Does anybody know of any homes that might be coming available that match this criteria, right? Dig into that database. Number 1, you might pick up a listing from it. Number 2, you may help connect your buyer with a property that's not even on the market. And now you've become the most amazing agent in the entire world. Okay, post your buyer's needs on social media. Once a week, go in there and say, here's my buyer's needs. I'm looking for the following houses. Great way to lead generate for potential listings. Okay. You can make sure you follow up with like your top 10% in your database. Once you send out that email, follow up with them via phone and just be like, hey, just checking in with you. Making sure, you see my email, we're having a hard time finding a house that matches this criteria. If you see one that's coming available, let me know, right? Ask for those referrals. And you could consider, if you have the ability to edit your current website, that you could put your current buyers section on there where you keep your buyers information anonymous, but you could put what you have buyers looking for. Okay. When we get ready to schedule those showings, we want to make sure that we look at the information posted in the MLS under the private remarks. What did the listing agent say about the property? Are there any attached documentation? Do they have instructions for showing? Do they want you to use showing time? Do they not want you to use showing time? Do they want you to text? Do they want you to call? Right? Follow those instructions, because there's nothing worse than irritating the listing agent before you go write an offer on their house. Okay, so we make sure we follow those instructions. I like to use the cart features in Barry. So I find all the listings that my buyer wants to look at. I throw them into a cart. I label it the buyer's name and the date of the showing appointment. That allows me to be able to access those properties really quickly. It also allows me to throw them into the routing there on Barry's, which throws them into Google Maps, which I can send to my phone. And now I know exactly what order we're going to go see these properties in. And I have directions on my phone, so I can plug it into my car and follow those directions from house to house.
Can I share something that just happened to me real fast? As far as like looking, can I share something that happened to me this week that real fast? As far as looking at one of my buyers was looking from Zillow. She sent it over to me, and there really wasn't a whole bunch of information on Zillow. And then when I looked it up on the MLS, it was actually part of a affordable housing project that had a 30,000 people waiting list, but it doesn't show that on Zillow. Yeah. And so like now I have to tell her there's a waiting list and it's part of affordable housing thing, and there's 30,000 people ahead of you. So and that was a very tiny little remark and the private remark.
Yep. That's why those private remarks are so important. So yeah, make sure you're paying attention to those private remarks for things like that. And there's other things that pop up, like sometimes properties go on the market and they're not available to be seen for like a week and a half, or sometimes they want you to write an offer without seeing the property. So pay attention to those private remarks. We're going to call ahead to schedule those appointments, right? Make sure they're all scheduled and confirmed. I usually have a little like notepad on my phone. I put all the properties in there. I write whether they're vacant or occupied, what the showing instructions were, like who to contact, and whether it's been confirmed yet or not as I send out, so that I can track it and not have to like sit by my phone the whole time. When you arrive at the property, make sure you know how to use a lockbox. In case you've never used a lockbox before, you're going to tap the bottom of that lockbox, which causes the red light to flash. It'll make a little clicking noise. Then you're going to open up your app, plug in, hit, open shackle, or not open shackle, open key box, and put in your little code. And then it should communicate with the key box and beep at you or tell you it was successful, where you're going to knock up the bottom of that lockbox again, and the bottom will fall out, showing you the key. It'll be like magic, but practice before you go show houses the first time so that you feel confident in using those lock boxes. You want to make sure, even if it was a vacant home or your showing was confirmed, that you knock on the door before you open it, please. I've walked in on lots of people, even after knocking, even after being told it was a vacant home. So always knock, always ring the doorbell, wait a few seconds, then use the key to go ahead and access the property and announce yourself, right? Hey, Amy here with Realty One Group. Is anybody home? Right? It scares the no good people out the doors and windows. It's highly effective. We used to do it all the time back in like 2008. So we just chase people out of properties all the time. I usually am the first one in the door because I'm just going to scan the house real quick, make sure everything looks like it was in order, make sure that it looks like they were expecting us, make sure I don't see anybody sitting around, right? After I lead somebody into the door, that is the only time I'm going to lead them through that house. From there on out, they're going to lead me through the house. I'm going to keep myself between them and the exit point. It's a safety and security thing so that I know that if something were to go sour, especially if I'm meeting with clients that I don't really have a good relationship with, these Zillow leads and stuff, that I'm always between them and the exit point. I don't lead them into bedrooms. I don't walk them into bathrooms. I follow them through the house, but not like on them and not pointing out everything. I'm kind of letting them view and take in the house for themselves. And I may be asking questions throughout the way. You want to make sure that you encourage exploration, right? This is a house that they might be purchasing. It's okay for them to open cabinets and open closets. Totally acceptable. Please don't open dressers. We're not buying those. Okay. If they have young children, keep an eye on their kids. Kids oftentimes like to grab things, bring it from one room to another. We're trying to prevent that. I don't generally get in the middle of it and be like, oh, you know, Maciel, can you please control your son? Like he's grabbing things. I just go up to the child and be like, oh, let me put that away for you, right? So I just kind of take the initiative to try to come at it from a nice, kind way and keep things where they were supposed to be.
My kids never. No, I'm kidding.
Here, you want some cookies and candy? Go sit in the corner over there and eat the cookies and candy while your parents look.
There we go. You talked
Sometimes-
about bringing snacks. We need to bring those things for the kids.
Right. And sometimes I've offered, like, you've got a parent carrying like one of those baby carriers around, one of those infant car seats. I'll say, you know, if you want to set your baby down, or, you know, I usually know the baby's name, I'll be happy to stand here and watch and make sure they're okay while you guys look through the house. So if they're not like trying to lug that thing through the whole house, or sometimes kids are asleep in the car. So I'm happy to like be the babysitter while they look at the house. Let me open the house for you and make sure everything's good to go. And then you guys can go look through the house and I'll make sure your kid is asleep in the car, right? Like, be helpful and handy. Watch and listen, right? Watch their expressions, listen to what they're saying, get feedback, ask questions, and then make sure you return the home as you found it. If when you came in, all the lights were off, leave the lights off. If all the lights were on, leave them on. If the kids played with the toys, try to like clean them up and put them back, right? And then always, it's good practice to leave your business card behind so that they actually know somebody came through and showed their house. It's really fun as a listing agent where you get these calls from your clients. Are like, did that agent ever even show up? They didn't, I don't see anything. I didn't see them, right? Well, you shouldn't see them because I told you leave the house 15 minutes before the showing appointment. And I told you not to return for 45 minutes. So you shouldn't have seen them. And then there's no business card. They think nobody showed up and they were just inconvenienced. So try to leave your business card behind, or a note. Maybe leave a trail of red juice, something, so they know you're there. I'm joking about the red juice.
Red juice. The kid's diaper. Just kidding.
These are your do nots. Do not accompany buyers into every room. It's not necessary. Don't state the obvious. Oh, look, it's a kitchen, right? Not necessary. Don't disagree with them. You're not buying the house. They are. If they think the color is ugly, like, you're not going to be like, no, it's not. You're like, oh, it's an interesting color choice, right? Whatever. Good thing it's paint and we can change that really easily. Don't skip a home. Think how you feel. I don't have a problem with skipping a home. Okay. It says don't skip a home. I'm an advocate of skipping homes. If we're looking through homes and we know the next one's the same floor plan as the one we already saw, or has a feature that they thought they liked that now we've realized they don't like, I'm just going to reach out to the listing agent. That's why I have the list of names and numbers readily available and say, hey, just a heads up, like we had a showing scheduled at 2:15. We're not going to make it to that appointment. I apologize. Right? Communicate. So if you're going to skip a home, communicate. And don't set up more showings until the buyer has eliminated this one from consideration, right? So until we get an answer of what they liked and what they didn't like on the homes that we saw, we're not going to go see more properties. Any questions about those do's and don'ts?
Do you normally print up the client detail list for them and then like, so I'll meet them at like the first property and then I'll hand them a list of, I'll hand them a packet and it has the client detail list of the other homes that we're going to see?
Yeah, so oftentimes, especially on our first showing appointment, I will print up the client one-page report from Barry's and put them in order of how we're going to see them and hand that packet to them at the first showing. I like the one page because it only requires me to print one page per listing. Makes it easy to see and gives them a summary. Now, depending on their reaction to that packet is dependent on whether I would provide them that in the future. Some people are like, that's cool, I don't care, right? Some people are like, oh, good, I got all the details and I need to know everything. Those people are going to get one every time. So then after that first showing, it kind of depends moving forward. You're going to ask questions if you go, right? If there were no more homes to see, which one would you choose and why? That's a good question, right? We're always asking why. We want them to elaborate. We're trying not to ask close-ended questions. We're trying to ask open questions that require them to give us more than a yes or a no. The advantage of this approach, right, is there's fewer homes to see. There is forward movement, and it makes it easier for them to make decisions. You also know if their criteria has changed, because the reality is oftentimes when you go look at buyers, hold on just 2 seconds. Oh, yeah, she's stuck. All right. So you don't really know what your criteria is. You know what you think you want in a house, but until you actually start going and walking through a few houses, you don't really flush out what those must-haves are. So pay attention, ask those questions, and try to see if the criteria is changing. And it's okay to ask your buyers, like, hey, so when we first started looking at homes, you said it was really important that, you know, that the backyard wasn't that important. But now it seems after walking through a few homes that backyard space is very important to you guys. Am I picking up on that correctly? Like, you guys want to see some homes that have like a yard that your children can go run and play in, not a piece of cement. Right. And they'll be like, yeah, we didn't even think about that or realize that that was going to be something that was important to us. Right. So it's okay to ask and identify where those criteria have changed. Okay. Our goal is to not show them 27 homes. Our goal is to show them like 6-10 homes max until we start writing offers on properties. Okay. We don't want to be showing them a bunch of homes. We want to move them through the process. And by identifying what their wants are, what they're not, their no-nos are, if their criteria is changing as we're going through and looking at properties, that we identify that so we can pinpoint the exact home that they're looking for. Spotlight or spot buying signals, right? Look at their expressions. We've talked about this already. Look at their body language. Are they excited about this house? Are they settling? Don't let your buyers settle for a house and write an offer they don't really love. It's just going to be sad. Watch for those nonverbal cues, right? Do they look at each other? Do they exchange glances, right? All of those buying signals. Do they start talking about how their furniture would fit in a room? Right. And as you realize that they're talking about, man, our couch is kind of oversized. Do you think it would fit in this room? Then as you walk into the next house, it makes it really easy to go, do you think your couch would fit in this living room? Right. Or do you think your bed set would fit in this bedroom? Right. Good ways to ask questions to help listen, pay attention, and identify what their needs are. This is more like it, right? That would be a phrase that they might use if they like this house better than the last one. Do you know if this house has offers, right? What are the property taxes for this house? I wonder what our payment would be. Those are all good signs that they like the house without saying that they love it. Or if they want to go back through the home again. Okay. Lingering in the home or lingering in a particular room would also be a nonverbal cue. Touching parts of the home, nodding, right? Starting to take notes if they haven't taken notes before, or not taking notes if they had taken notes before, or if they ask to like measure windows or rooms or the garage, right? Those are all good signs. And then you want to ask closing questions, which is going to help move your buyer right towards that being ready to make an offer. So trial questions, right? Will your armoire fit? Would this be the room for your son? You can, is this the one, right? How do you feel about this home? Would you feel comfortable living here? Well, it looks like this might be the one. Am I right? Right? Where would you place your armoire, your sectional, your king size bed? Which bedroom would be Susie's, right? Would you like to go somewhere, have a cup of coffee, and talk about putting an offer together on this property, right? When it's time to make the offer, you're going to ask closing questions. Are you ready to make an offer? Shall we make an offer on this one? Shall we pencil it up and see what it looks like on paper, right? All good ways to move them to making an offer. And securing the decision consists of summarizing the needs, summarize the benefits, and ask for the decision, right? Summarize the needs would look something like this. If we went back to when we started, you said that you're tired of not having a guest bath and the houses are so close that you're feeling hemmed in. Steve, you wanted to start your woodworking hobby again. Michelle, you indicated that your children are getting older. You wanted them to have separate bedrooms, and that with all your trips to the airport, you were tired of the long drive, right? Summarize whatever those needs were. You're going to summarize the benefits of the house. Home has the extra 3/4 bath for guests to use, leaving you, we don't have 3/4 baths. This has the extra second bath for guests to use, leaving you with your master bathroom being private. And it also has about 400 feet to your nearest neighbor, or, space in between. So you're not looking into your neighbor's window, which would give you the elbow room you wanted. Steve, you said you wanted a big garage so that you can do your woodworking stuff. And Francie, there will be a bedroom for each child, and the trip to the airport's only 20 minutes, if less than that, keeping you closer to the airport. In order to give you plenty of time to finalize the details on your present home, how would a 90-day close work, right? Or that seems like a really long time, but ask for that decision, right? So we're going to ask, in order to prepare you for moving, would you prefer a 30-day close escrow or a 45-day close escrow? Right? So feel free to ask for that decision. Are you ready to make an offer? If they revise their criteria, just address it with them, right? Ask them about criteria. If they're having problems making a decision on a house, go back over those lists with them and say, do we have these right? Has something changed? So it's okay to bring them back to those lists. If you've seen properties that meet the criteria of their must-haves, they don't have any of the no-nos, maybe have bonuses or no bonuses, it's okay if we've seen lots of properties, we've seen 6 houses, nothing interests them, to go back and revisit those lists and be like, it seems like we're missing something, right? Is there something that's changed on these lists? Or does it come with fear of not understanding the process or fear of moving forward, right? A home purchase is a really big property. Key areas of the offer, we'll go over this more in detail when we cover the purchase agreement, but just know that we need to put together an offer that makes them shine. And so, when it comes to the loan type, the down payment, inspection, repairs, contingencies, all those things, those are all key parts of the offer. We're going to skip through this. Once you get the offer made and you're negotiating, right? So we want to make sure that your buyers understand that they probably will have to make a choice on either price or terms. Oftentimes we don't get both. This market's a little weird because it's technically, all the indicators say it's still a seller's market, but because we don't have very many buyers in the market, it's kind of a weird, funky market based on properties for sale, months of inventory. Buyers have a little bit more pull for the most part, but sometimes not. But we need to make sure we have these conversations with them, right? What's more important to them? If they're like, man, we want a 90-day close of escrow, and we want them to give us $10,000 in credits, and we want to offer $20,000 below asking price. It's a good time to have that conversation about, oftentimes, what you're asking here is, because we're coming in $20,000 below asking, and we're asking for $10,000 in a closing cost credit, we're really coming in $30,000 below asking. And oftentimes our sellers are going to agree with our terms, or they're going to agree with our price. So what's more important to you? Is it more important that you get a credit towards your closing costs, or is it more important that we keep that price lower? Right? Good way to have that conversation to help bring them to the final offer that they're actually going to make on that property without being unreasonable or insult the sellers. Okay. They can't ask for personal property. They can't ask for repairs. If it's something up front, if we walk through the home and there is something we noticed about that home that the buyers are like, man, this home would be perfect, but that roof, man, it just looks like it's about ready to fall apart, and I'm just not comfortable moving forward. Be like, great, let's write up an offer and we'll ask them to take care of any repairs that need done on the roof or replace the roof, right? So if you can tell it's aged, or right, so we can ask for those things up front. If those things are deal breakers and you can see them walking through the home, please include them as part of your offer. If you have a VA buyer and they're going to require a clear pest inspection, which most only require the Form 33 anymore, but let's say their lender requires that Form 33, or not the Form 33, but a clear pest, and we're negotiating a VA, ask for it up front, right? Negotiate those repairs and put a cap on it as part of the offer so that you're eliminating those unknowns and helping to negotiate and make it a win-win for both the buyer and the seller. I would recommend not including a buyer cover letter from your buyer, but you do want to include a cover letter from yourself. So there's a couple of examples of cover letters in the folder that we're going to share with you so that you can see kind of what that layout looks like. It's really easy to kind of save it in your emails like a draft, pull it up, copy, paste, and then update the information so that you're summarizing the offer and introducing it in your email and before they even open the offer. Makes it super easy. I always put at the end, like this one does, I look forward to working with you on a seamless transaction, right? I'm going to assume the acceptance. Before you write the offer, make sure you communicate with the listing agent, call, email, text, right? So we're going to have conversations with that listing agent before we even write the offer to make sure we know what the sellers what's important to the sellers, what they're looking for, if they have any other offers in hand, if they've had any other offers that the seller has rejected, if it fell out of escrow, if we can pinpoint why that happened, if they have any reports, inspections, disclosures on file, get all that information up front before you write the offer. And then once you're in contract, please communicate with the listing agent on a regular basis. Sometimes it's easy to kind of forget them or not say anything, but then their mind goes to the worst and it doesn't help the relationship, right? So real estate is relationship based, and that goes for not only with our clients themselves, but the other agents. And pay attention in the MLS too of where they want that offer submitted. Okay. And you can do the MLS Connect in your zip forms, which we will show you tomorrow at 4, of how to pull the data from the MLS into your transaction so that all the listing agent information goes in there and all the property information's in there and fully executed on your offer. Makes it super simple. So just make sure you're paying attention. Handling difficult agents, these totally don't exist, so you don't have to worry about this. You want to look at the big picture and remember who you represent. Sometimes you have to deal with difficult people because that's the house that your buyers want. Okay. And you have to overlook the fact that it's going to be a difficult transaction. We don't want to necessarily share that with our buyers because we want to keep them on the positive, and it's not our place to be like, oh, are you sure you want to write an offer on this house? This agent's kind of a jerk, right? We would never say that. Is it a war of egos, right? Is it like who's right, who's wrong? Do I want to be right or do I want to get paid, right? What makes it a win-win for clients? So that's a really easy way to refocus. If you always think about trying to make it a win-win for both parties, that's a really good way to approach a tough situation with another agent. And remember too, that oftentimes difficult agents are difficult because their clients are difficult. Okay. Not always, but oftentimes their clients really difficult to deal with. And so they're just passing that along to you. And so be helpful, be positive. Don't get sucked down to their world. Okay. And look for win-wins. If you're getting frustrated, take deep breaths, maybe even be like, hey, actually, can I call you back in about 10 minutes? So you have time to calm down and kind of regroup and come at it from a different angle if you're having problems having a conversation with a different agent. And never hesitate to pull in, if you've got a mentor, pull your mentor into that conversation, or pull the broker into that conversation as well if it's reached a level at which you need to pull the broker in. Okay. Some people don't answer phone calls. They don't return text messages. They don't see their emails. We had an agent submit an offer this last week. They submitted it on Friday. They didn't hear from that agent again until like Monday afternoon, and their voicemail was full. And so they were really frustrated, and there's not a whole lot that you can do in that situation. So I was like, well, give it till Monday afternoon. And then if you don't hear from them, then we'll take it to the next step. Luckily we heard back. Otherwise, you know, after not hearing from an agent that I submitted an offer on, I would have taken it a step further and maybe reached out to somebody in their office to be like, hey, is this agent okay? We submitted an offer, we've called, we've texted, we've, you know, sent emails, we haven't heard anything, just trying to figure out what the best way is to reach them. Handling a difficult buyer. Again, we never have difficult buyers either. All of our buyers are wonderful and delightful. No, I'm just joking. But setting those expectations up front, setting those expectations at the beginning of the transaction, but when you sit down with the buyer presentation, going what the expectations are for repairs, for showings, right? Setting that up front helps buyers not to be as difficult. And sometimes our buyers are still unreasonable when we get into a transaction. And so we just want to educate them and walk them through that process. We want to try to figure out where the difficulty is coming from, because oftentimes it's not actually coming from the buyer, it's coming from fear or insecurity with the purchase itself. So we want to try to get to the bottom of those fears and insecurities by asking questions, and then addressing those concerns, isolate and address. And if you've got a buyer that's just difficult, you don't have to work with everybody, fire them and send them on their way. Okay, if you've got a buyer that's always like, I want a good deal, I'm going to offer 50,000 below asking, no matter what the price is, or if it's already a good deal, and you know their offer is never going to get accepted, just send them on their way. Work with somebody else. Don't waste your time. Let's see here. Oh, understanding the real estate markets, right? I told you this market's kind of a funky market because technically, it's considered if you got 1 to 5 months worth of inventory, it's a seller's market where the seller's in control. We're sitting at about 2.5 months of inventory right now. And it's not technically a seller's market when you go to write offers. Buyers have a little bit more pull and play. When you have 6 months of inventory on the market, it's considered a balanced market, and more than 6 would be considered a buyer's market. We always have to take into account what's happening in our individual markets. Are there multiple offers? What are sellers expecting, right? So we always have to take that into account and figure out where that balance lies. Right now, our inventory is not super high. It's on the low side. I think I pulled Vacaville yesterday, was like at 100 homes, which we should be closer to like 250 for a balanced market. However, our buyers right now are also low because of the interest rates. And so that's keeping it more of like leaning towards a buyer's market, even though our inventory is still low. So just kind of know what's out there and how to communicate that to your buyers. When you present the offer, most offers get sent over via email, or they get submitted on a website that's made to handle offers like Glide or Homelight Listing Management. Make sure you check the MLS for instructions. Always talk with the listing agent. Anytime I submit an offer, I always shoot the listing agent over a call to let them know, number one, that I'm planning to submit an offer. And then once it's been submitted, I let them know via text that I had submitted the offer on Homelight or via email, whatever their instructions were. It's very rare that you submit an offer in person, although you can always ask for that right to submit that offer. Opening and closing escrow, right? Once we have an accepted offer, we're going to, I feel like this lesson ultimately needs to be broken into like 2 sections, but we're going to just power through it. We're almost done. I'm sorry we ran over. It's 12:15. If you need to go, totally okay. It's going to be recorded. But once we get the offer accepted, obviously we make the offer. They can either ignore us completely. They can reject the offer. They can counter the offer, right? So we can play ball. That comes into that negotiation tactics. Once we all come to an agreement, we open escrow. So we're going to send copies of that fully executed purchase agreement, any addendums and all counter offers to the title company. We're going to send it to our buyer's lender. We can send a copy to the buyer. We're going to make sure the other agent has a copy of it, and our transaction coordinator. We're always going to advise.
Don't forget Sky Slope.
We're not even there yet. This is just for emailing it out.
Gotcha.
There's a whole form in our contract that talks about the wiring instructions, but always advise buyer to verify wiring instructions prior to making their earnest money deposit. I have an email that I send out once we enter into contract that goes out to our buyers that says, congratulations, we're in contract. The next couple of weeks is going to feel a little bit crazy. There's a lot going on. We're going to send a copy of the contract to your loan officer, who's going to have you, fill out the initial disclosures, and then we can have inspections on the property. Here are the inspections that we recommend, with a little blurb about each one with the approximate cost. What inspections would you like? Would you like to be there? Right? A copy of that email is in the folder as well. You're welcome. So you can tweak it. I let them know that the inspections are optional, that they don't have to be at the inspections, but they can be, and that we recommend they are at the inspections. Ask them what their schedule is. I let them remind them about the earnest money deposit, what the amount is and where that would need to go to, and ask them what method they would like to use to get the deposit to escrow and when it's due by. So we go over all of those details. And then after we enter into contract, my transaction coordinator sends out a summary email with all the timelines of the contract outline that goes out to, she sends one email to the other agents, so that we make sure we're both on the same page with all the contract deadlines, and then one also to the buyer that goes out separately so that they understand what their contract deadlines are as well. There is an example of one of those in that folder as well. Let's see, once we get through our inspections, once we get through our repairs, once they've met all the lender requirements, right, we're moving through this pending to close. The lender is going to issue what we call a closing disclosure, the CD. It's really important to know when the CD goes out, because once that CD goes out, you're dead in the water for 3 days. So if you're supposed to close tomorrow and the CD has not gone out yet, you are not closing tomorrow, guaranteed. It's a requirement that that CD goes out, and then you wait 3 days before your buyers can sign their final loan documents. That's a good time to schedule your final walkthrough to verify that the property is in the same condition as it was when you entered into contract, or make sure any repairs have been completed. It is also a great time for your buyers to start making arrangements on utilities getting turned on, because now we kind of have our time frame of when we're going to close, if we're going to close on time or not. So all of that happens kind of once that closing disclosure gets issued, once you're clear to close from the lender. Dun, dun, dun. In the state of California, just so everybody knows, once that closing disclosure is issued, your buyers usually go to the title company and they sign all their final documents, or they sign with a mobile notary, wherever they want to do it. Then what happens is it's usually like a 3-day process. We sign one day. Well, it's usually a 2-day process now. It used to be a 3-day, but Solano County added additional recording time frame, so we can close a little faster now. So most of the time we sign one day, the lender funds it the next day, and then oftentimes it records that next day as well. Sometimes we sign one day, funds the next day from the lender, where they actually send the funds to the title company, and then we record the next day. So just kind of know what's going on in the city or county where you're at, and what their time frames are for being able to get that recorded, and also what the lender's time frames are for reviewing what we call the funding package, so they can issue the funds. The cutoff for funds is usually like noonish. So if the lender hasn't funded the loan by like noon, you're not funding that day. Okay, just some little tidbits there. Once our contracts generally state that our buyers get keys upon notice of recordation. So once it's been recorded, then we can make the time to go meet with our buyers to give them keys and get them into their house. We talked about that. Escrow documents signed, fund release sales recorded. I skipped a couple slides, obviously. Let's see, buyer takes possession of the home. That's when they get their keys. It's a good idea as you're moving through this process, the funds have been issued, to reach out to the other agent. Say, hey, just touching base with you. It looks like we're going to close later today, or it looks like we're going to close in the morning. Do you want me to take the keys out of the lockbox? And are there any other keys or remotes I should be aware of? Right? So make sure you get everything ahead of time and you're ready to get those keys and deliver them to your buyer. It may also be a good time to check in with the buyer and say, hey, heads up, like we signed yesterday, it looks like we're going to fund today, but we're not going to record until tomorrow, which was our close of escrow date. What does your day look like tomorrow? When do you want to meet up to have keys? We should have confirmation of recording, in the morning by about 10 o'clock. Sometimes I fudge it. So we usually get, confirmation either by like 10 or 3, depending on if it's a morning or afternoon. So if I'm expecting a morning recording, I may be like, we should have confirmation by noon, so that I have a little buffer zone in there. When do you want to meet up to get keys, right? So we're going to have that conversation and kind of pre-plan that. And then we deliver keys. I highly recommend not delivering if you do like a closing gift. Don't do it at the same time you do keys. Delay it out a couple weeks and then go visit them, ask them how the house is and drop off their present. They're super excited just to get keys at the close of escrow. So if you do your gift and keys at the same time, often the gift gets overlooked. So use it as another touch point at a couple weeks out so you can follow up with them. We did not get to the buyer broker agreement. There was something else we didn't get to. But does anybody have any questions? I will schedule a separate training for the buyer broker agreement.
Can Abby email this presentation to us?
Yeah, we'll put this presentation into the same folder where she sent the link, and that'll be linked in the comment section of the video so that you can access that.
Okie dokie. Do
Does
we
that
have our,
sound good?
do we have our sign in, or what is it called?
The attendance.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for.
Hold on, I'm just trying to figure out how to get out of this. I can't get out of full screen. There we go. Let's go. File. Exit full screen. It's because it's hidden. That's why. All right. So let me show you what's in that folder real quick, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So you'll have access to this folder. We'll pop this presentation in there as well. I don't see the link yet for attendance, but I think you're okay. We have the buyer intro email in this folder so that you can see what that buyer intro email, and anything that's in this folder, you guys just take it and use it. There's your attendance. There's the buyer questionnaire. There's a copy of the buyer representation agreement. There's a copy of a buyer's guide in there. It's Carrie's buyer guide from Realty One Group Corporate. They're working on one in our design center. It hasn't been released yet. There's the sample presentation cover letter. There's a couple of those, a copy of the offer summary that you could send out after you enter into escrow. And this, I think, is like gold right here. This is the transaction action plan. There's 2 tabs on this. It's got a buyer tab, or maybe a listing tab and a purchase tab. So if we go to the purchase, it kind of walks you through this step by step in as much detail as I could come up with about what you would do. We're going to set the consultation appointment, get the loyalty agreement signed, copy of pre-approval, confirm info with lender, right? So it's got all the steps in there. I try to include little tidbits if an explanation was necessary. From green on is entered into contract. This is all during contract. It's got like all the steps you would do during contract. And then closed and deliver closing gift, right? So super cool, handy thing there that you can use to kind of move through your transactions, and you can tweak it and edit it and make it your own, as always. There's also that for the listing side as well. And just so you know, I used this list to, when I was hiring my transaction coordinator, and then I moved her to a transaction admin. So if you look on like the listing, that's why it has like TC fee, and then it's got current owner, new owner. So if it was, this is kind of like your growth plan. If you were going to be like, well, I wanted to grow my team, then it would show you kind of what a transaction coordinator would take on, or what your admin might take on versus what you would hold on to. So just a little handy little cheat sheet there. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up today?
No, ma'am, I'm good.
Thank you for hanging out with me a little longer than planned. I appreciate it. We will probably, we've got the purchase agreement coming up next week on Tuesday. I may add another 4 o'clock time slot on maybe Tuesday or something like that, so that we can go over like the buyer broker agreement. And maybe we'll just make that like a regular ongoing forms class. But let me think about that for a minute. Let me think about my time. So, but we will go over that buyer broker agreement. I'm sorry I didn't get to it today, but next week we do cover the purchase agreement.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yep.
You're the best.
Absolutely.
Have a good day, everybody.